What is up, ladies and gentlemen? This is AJ Forbes coming at you on a solo podcast today. Now, we are coming up on one of my favorite times of the year. Yes, we got Christmas coming up. Yes, we got New Year's Eve right on the horizon, but I am talking about Army Navy. Now, I've been watching Army Navy ever since 2012. I distinctly remember watching Army quarterback Trent Steelman fumble the ball on what was supposed to be the game-winning drive for Army to put a nail in the coffin on Navy's long streak of wins against Army in this game. He fumbled away the game on the game-winning drive, um, and immediately you could just see the emotion in his face. It's something that really struck a chord with me because these players who would soon go on to serve in the United States military, they cared so much about beating the other side. This was Trent Steelman's last chance at beating Navy in his career. He went 0-4 against Navy in his career. This was his last opportunity to really put the game away, make a mark uh, on his career, which was already illustrious, right? He had almost 1,500 rushing yards his senior year, 17 touchdowns, one of the best Army quarterbacks of all time. When he fumbled that game away, and I hate to say that because he's such a great guy, you could just see the emotion on his face. He cared so much. He wanted to beat Navy so bad. And college football rivalries in general, they're always great, but this game it just feels like something more. Like I already said, we already have a group of men who are going to serve our country in the military, right? But there's just something so poetic about two teams that are full of players that are eventually going to be fighting on the same team, literally fighting for our country, but they despise each other for 4 years. Army's mantra, the every season is beat Navy. Navy's mantra every season is beat Army. And that is consistent for years, for decades. And I love it. Now, before we get into the actual game, what I want to make note of is these two teams, they have some insane uniforms. This has become a really cool tradition for both sides. I'm not quite sure how long this has been going on, but ever since I've been watching it, each team has brought out an alternate uniform that they wear specifically for this game. This year, Army is dedicating their uniforms to the 101st Airborne Division, specifically with their role in the Battle of the Bulge. Now, the Battle of the Bulge, for those who don't know, um, in the defense of Bastogne, it was the turning point for the United States during World War II. The United States was surrounded on all sides by Germany, um, and my great grandfather actually was an artilleryman during that battle, which is a really cool side note. But Army, they have all black uniforms. They have splatters of white on the shoulder pads and on the helmet. That is supposed to depict snow because the battle was fought in the snow during the dead of winter. Uh, Another cool point is the nameplate. Nameplate is extremely cool. During the battle, a German general sent a message to the United States forces, specifically to General Anthony McCullough, um, asking him to surrender because, again, they were surrounded on all sides. McCullough said one word in his response. It was nuts, Nuts exclamation point. What you'll see on the Army nameplate is Army, ARMY exclamation point. Now that's a tribute to that right there. Um, it's really a tribute to the defiance of the enemy in the face of what was supposed to be a defeat for the United States, and that I feel like that's pretty compliant with what we have in Army Navy. Now with Navy, we're looking at a tribute to the Jolly Rogers. Now the Jolly Rogers is the most lethal squadron in naval aviation history. From what I could see, from 1943 they started flying. Again, we have some pretty cool symmetry there with both teams paying homage to World War II specific uh, squadrons and divisions. The Jolly Rogers again they were the most lethal squadron in naval aviation history. During that time period, from when they started in 1943 to the end of World War II, they ended up having over 150 confirmed kills, which is insane. The skull and crossbones was their insignia. Um, it's all across the uniform. It's on the jersey. It's on the sides of the helmet. It's on the pants. And that's a nod to their phrase "Fear the Bones," which is again, it's that's pretty badass. The color blocking is the same as the planes in that squadron, and then the helmet. The helmet is a nod to past and present aviator helmets that the Jolly Rogers wear. Now, badass uniforms aside, let's get into these teams. Now, as an overview, let's start with Army. Army just finished their season at 11-1. They ended the season as American Conference champions. This is their first season in a conference in a long time. And in their first season, they ended up winning the conference, which is pretty cool. Um, Again, they were 11-1. Their one loss was to Notre Dame in a blowout fashion in Yankee Stadium. That was a tough one. You would have thought, based on everything that you saw from Army going into that game, that they were going to put up a better fight than they did. But you take that game out, they've been dominant. They've been dominant. Looking at Navy, they are sitting at 8-3. Not a bad record. It's been a long time since both of these teams have been really good together at the same time. Actually, this season, it was the first time that they had been ranked in the top 25 at the same time since World War II. And again, World War II has become a theme when talking about this game. But they started off extremely hot. Navy did. They won their first 6 games, and they were nationally ranked, like I said. But they lost 3 of the last 5. All right. The blowout loss again to Notre Dame. Navy and Army both played Notre Dame this year. They both lost in blowout fashion. Notre Dame ended up being the sixth seed, I believe, in the college football playoff. So that's not a terrible loss, I guess. But Navy did end up losing by more against Notre Dame. But that Notre Dame loss was really the first domino to fall. They ended up losing 3 of their last 5 games, and we're gonna get into why that is later on. Looking at the Army players to watch, I mean, it all starts with Bryson Daly, man. Um, if you haven't watched an Army football game this year, you have no idea how good this man is. He is currently tied for the nation's lead in rushing touchdowns with 29. The only person that has as many is Ashton Jeanty, who is a Heisman finalist. And just as a side note, it is absolutely insane that Bryson Daly is not a Heisman finalist this year. I know Ashton Jeanty was going to be in there. We all knew that Travis Hunter was going to be in there. I don't agree that Cam Ward and Dylan Gabriel should have been in there over Bryson Daly. The Heisman is supposed to go to the most outstanding college football player in the country, and I don't know if Dylan Gabriel and Cam Ward had as much of an effect on their team as Bryson Daly did, frankly. How many times has Army gone 11-1 in a season, right? I mean, you look at everything that they need to deal with. They have no NIL. They don't use the transfer portal. All of their guys, they have to gain. You look at both offensive and defensive lines. They have to gain and lose 30, 50 pounds every year in order to comply with their military requirements and play football at the same time. So it's actually insane what these military academies have to deal with. But again, Bryson Daly needs to be a Heisman finalist. I've been pounding the table for this guy all season. He's had 100 yards rushing in 10 straight games. Again, he's a quarterback. So it shouldn't be surprising that he's also the 9th leading rusher in the country. Obviously, he is the leading quarterback in that category when it comes to rushing yards. All in all, the man is a linebacker playing quarterback. He is insanely tough. He's insanely durable. Don't be surprised if he has 30 carries coming up on Saturday. What's really cool is that he can run through you and he can run around you. He has great open field speed. He can hurdle you. Actually, he's had multiple touchdown runs this year after a hurdle in the open field. The guy is awesome. Next guy that we're going to talk about is fullback Kanye Udo. We have a couple fullbacks that we're going to talk about today. Kanye Udo is awesome. Like I can't get over how fun this Army football team is to watch. How many fullbacks do you know in the last, I don't know, 50 years that have 1,000 yards rushing on the season? Oh wait, Kanye Udo is one of those guys. 1,000 yards rushing on the season. The last over the last 5 games, he has had over 150 rushing yards twice. Most running backs don't do that, let alone a fullback. Now, this is a downhill offense. All right. We're going to get into the distinctions between Army and Navy in terms of what they like to do on offense here in a second. But this is a downhill offense. They want to run between the tackles. And if Bryson Daly isn't carrying the ball, Udo probably is. Okay. We're going to move on to the other side of the ball, and we're going to look at Max DiDomenico, safety for Army. Last guy I'll talk about when it comes to Army. He's the captain of this defense. He's third in the team in tackles, first in pass deflections. I made a video earlier on social media about, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks ago, something like that. It was around the time that they played Notre Dame. I mentioned DiDomenico in that because he's a safety that had a club on his hand for a large part of the season. I mean, these guys are just insanely tough. I know they're in the military. I know they're supposed to be tough. But seeing a safety out there with a club on his hand, running around, coming downhill, making tackles. He's also first in pass deflections, by the way, which is pretty cool. I think he's fourth on the team when it comes to interceptions. He has two. He's 2 interceptions on the year. But he's going to be the guy that's leading the defense. Now, when you look at what Navy likes to do on offense, Navy is not the traditional option offense anymore. Okay. Air Force still is. Army, again, is insanely option heavy. Okay. Navy is not. They have changed the offensive coordinators. They changed the head coaches last year, 2 years ago. Changed offensive coordinators. They are more of a spread team now. Now they will jump into flex, the more traditional flex bone stuff. As a side tangent, real quick, there is a difference between wing T and flex bone. Flex bone is what you'll see most of the military academies run. Wing T is what you would see Delaware run back in like the 70s and 80s. All right, there is a massive distinction. I could talk for an hour about the difference between those two. But flex bone is what you are more accustomed to seeing when it comes to the military academies. Navy is not that anymore. They are big time spread. Like I said, they'll jump in and out of it, going back to their option routes. But I say that because DiDomenico and the secondary of Army is going to need to play well in order to win this game. Now, I think we all believe that Army is going to be the better football team than Navy in this on Saturday. However, it is a big rivalry game, and records and how well you play, those kind of go out the window when it comes to these rivalry games. It just means more to these players, especially when it comes to Army Navy. These safeties are going to have to play well. There's a lot of motions. There's a lot of shifts when it comes to Navy's offense. There's a lot of jet sweeps, and we'll talk about that later. And I say that, I don't want to sound like a novice when I say, oh, yeah, there's a lot of jet sweeps. You go watch this offense. They make a living on the perimeter when it comes to their run game and their passing game. All right. So safeties are going to have to play well. They're going to have to be in coverage more than they have probably been used to in the past when it comes to this game. But Max DiDomenico is a player to watch on this Army defense. Going over to Navy, first guy that I'll talk about is the Navy quarterback. I talked about Blake Horvath earlier. He was awesome to start the season. He was a guy who honestly was creeping into Heisman talks in parallel to Bryson Daly as the season was going on. Now, health has been an issue for Blake Horvath this year. He's missed the last 2 regular season games. He played banged up for the middle part of the season, but the last 2 games in the regular season he missed. I will say it is normal for teams to hold out just a little bit longer when it comes to their star players being injured. They'll give those guys a little more time when it comes to getting back on the field, especially right before we get into a big rivalry game. And that obviously applies here. There is a massive drop off between Horvath and their backup, Braxton Woodson. And that is not an indictment on Braxton Woodson. I'm sure, in the limited playing time he's had, he's been okay. But Blake Horvath, it's more of a compliment to Blake Horvath and what he's been able to do this year. He's been banged up all year. He's still the leading rusher by about 400 yards, I think. Second is the guy that we're going to talk about here in a second. Alex Teska, that is Navy's fullback. Like I said, Navy is much more of a spread team than they have been in the past, especially since in the past. Navy makes its money again on the perimeter. They're going to run jet sweeps. They're going to run tosses. They're going to run pitches. They're going to run load options. But Teska is still Navy's second leading rusher behind Blake Horvath. Navy slotbacks are going to have longer runs. They have a higher yards per carry average than Teska does. But Teska is going to be the bell cow, especially if Blake Horvath is going to be playing this week. I have a feeling that he's going to push through whatever injury he has. But Teska is going to be the workhorse for this team. If Horvath doesn't play, this guy is going to lead Navy in carries. Might not lead them in yards because, again, with what they do with their slots, they're an explosive play offense, and they truly rely on their slots being explosive because otherwise they really have a hard time getting the ball down the field. But don't be surprised if Teska ends up leading Navy in carries on Saturday. Last guy that we're going to talk about is linebacker Colin Ramos. Now, Colin leads Navy in tackles and tackles for loss this year. I was surprised when I did some research on this guy. He's 5'11", 205. Now, the 5'11" part, that doesn't bother me too much. You're talking to a center, a guy who plays center in Division I college football at about 6'1.5" on a good day. So height is really not an issue for me. What was surprising, though, is that he was 205. That's the surprising part for me. When you're talking about like the modern day and age of college football, where everything is so spread out, you have to be a lighter guy. You're basically a slow safety at linebacker is what it comes down to. To be able to cover as much ground as linebackers need to do nowadays when it comes to the air raid passing game, the spread offenses. But when it comes to going up against the kind of offense that Army runs, where it's heavy personnel, it is tight quarters, it is downhill running game, that can be a concern. The last time that Navy played an option team this year, because again, all these military academies, they play each other to try to win the Commander-in-Chief's trophy, which is another really cool trophy in college football. The last time they played an option team this year was Air Force. Against Air Force, he had the second fewest tackles in a game that he's had this season. Navy's D-line was questionable during that game. They had a hard time holding up front, and that made the picture really muddy for Colin. Army's offensive line is insanely good. They are up for the Joe Moore Award. They're a finalist for the Joe Moore Award for the best offensive line in the country. And you watch these guys play. These guys get off the ball. Their offensive line coach actually just got the head coaching job at Central Michigan. Shout out to Matt Drinkle. Great coach. But this offensive line is insanely good. They're very big. They get off the ball fast. They are going to run you into the ground. They are relentless. Now, when you're talking about a Navy defensive line, that is questionable at best, let's say. That's going to make Colin Ramos' job a lot harder because he's going to have to filter through all the muck that is going on in front of him. When he's free, when he can go sideline to sideline, he's great. Again, he's the leading tackler on this Navy team. It is hard to have over 100 tackles in a college football season. But I believe that him and the rest of the linebacking crew at Navy are going to have a tough time if they're going to sit back and they're not going to pressure this defense. Again, you don't really want to pressure this type of defense. You don't want to present defenders in gaps What do I mean by that? Navy and Army both play in a 3-4 base, right? What Army does on defense, they are very attacking. They stunt and they blitz and they use their speed to their advantage. They're a little undersized, but they use their speed to their advantage by letting these guys slant and angle, and they bring linebackers off the edge, right? I believe that if Navy wants to try to do that, they're going to make this job easier for the Army offensive line because they're presenting themselves in the gap that they are responsible for, and that makes blocking easier. Trust me, you're talking to a guy that understands that as well as anybody. Going into our predictions, I guess my prediction. Army has been outstanding all season. Navy has stumbled into this postseason. They're going to a bowl game. This game does not count towards bowl eligibility. It doesn't matter anyway. Both teams are well over 6 wins. Army has been dominant all year, minus the Notre Dame game. Navy, like I said earlier, has stumbled into the postseason. Navy is not the option offensive old. They are a spread team. Regardless of whether Horvath plays or not, you're going to see Navy use multiple shifts, use multiple motions. They're trying to get their athletes in space, whether that be jet sweeps, double options, tosses, everything, power read, everything like that. They're going to try to get their athletes in space. I think Army's defense, whose defensive coordinator, Nate Woody, he's one of the best defensive minds in college football right now. I would argue in football, period. He's probably the best defensive coordinator that you've never heard of. And the way he runs this 3-4 system, it's literally called the East Coast 3-4 now because of what it's done. I believe this defense is going to play very well against this Navy offense, especially if Blake Horvath doesn't play. Going back at the history of this game, each team shows something that they haven't shown all season. Now, that can be a trick play, that can be a new formation, that can be a new defensive structure or a blitz or a coverage, that can be throwing more passes on Saturday than they have in a game the rest of the season. Something is going to happen for both Army and Navy. They're going to show something that they haven't done all season. That is normal for this game. Last thing I'll say is I think Army is just way better. I think they're way better. I believe that the O-line is going to be the difference maker. I believe Army's offensive line is too dominant. They're going to overwhelm Navy's defense. And I think that backfield is going to run all over the yard. If I look up on Saturday at the end of the game at 6 o'clock Central Time, Bryson Daly has 150 yards. Kanye Udo has 150 yards. And then Noah Short ends up taking a pitch for like 50. I'm not going to be surprised because this Army offense is that good, and that defense for West Point is going to have their hands full with this Navy offense, especially again if Forbath ends up playing. They're going to have a lot. They're going to have a lot of stuff to deal with, right? However, I think they're just better. Army is favored by a touchdown in this game. And if I was a betting man, like they are at Barn Burner Bets, I'd be pretty comfortable taking that. I appreciate you guys listening to this solo podcast of mine. This weekend is special to me. I just celebrated a birthday on Tuesday, December 10th. Turned the big 25 years old this week. This is one of my favorite weeks of the year. Not only is it's my birthday, you get the Army Navy game, and you get the Heisman ceremony. It's one of the best weekends in college football. I don't have a whole lot of military connections. I grew up in Bellevue, Nebraska. That's right where Offutt Air Force Base is. A lot of my friends and some of my family members are military, either active military or retired. I have an insane amount of respect for our veterans and our active duty servicemen and women. This game means, for whatever reason, I don't have any active military in my family personally outside of my in-laws, my father-in-law and my brother-in-law. But it's just such a poetic game. You don't usually think about football as a poetic game, but this is. I mentioned it earlier at the beginning, but it's something about two groups of men who despise each other so much for 4 years. Their goal each year is to beat the shit out of each other on the second week in December. After that game, all of those seniors, they're going to serve in the United States military. And they're going to be teammates with the players that they were trying to destroy on the football field. That is poetic to me. That is poetic. I love this game. I can't wait to watch it. You'll probably see me live tweeting on Barn Burner Sports. It's the only game this weekend, so it's gonna have my full attention. So again, thank all of you. I appreciate you guys listening in. We're going to come back next week. We're going to look over the first round of the college football playoff. We're going to make our picks. We're going to talk about the games. We're going to talk about the upcoming Heisman winner. The Heisman will be announced by the time we start recording next week, so we'll give our reactions for that. We're going to have a big week next week. So until then, thank you guys. Love you. See you next week.